Hello, folks. My name is Mick, and I'd like to cordially invite you to another episode of SHU Outdoors. Today, I'm going to tell you about the most gnarliest thing that I ever saw on Rikers Island. Probably one of the most gnarliest things that I ever saw, period, but definitely the most gnarly thing I ever saw on Rikers Island. I saw a whole bunch of gnarly things. So, when you first get to Rikers Island, so let me paint this picture for you. When the bus takes you to Rikers Island, it takes you to a neighborhood called East Elmhurst, Queens. Okay, now East Elmhurst, Queens is actually a nice, I would say, upscale neighborhood. More of a family type of neighborhood. It's not the type of neighborhood in New York City that has the big high-rise buildings. It's far out from Manhattan, and it has more like row houses and stuff like that. So it's a relatively nice, family-orientated neighborhood, I would say. Now, when they exit off to take you to Rikers Island, they take you right down the street through East Elmhurst, Queens. On one side of the street is like red brick brownstones. For you guys who don't know, that's like a townhouse in New York City. It's like a house, you know. A lot of times you might have a family on the bottom floor and a family on the top floor, or it might just be the whole family in the same house. But it's a nice neighborhood. On the other side of the street, there's a big wall because JFK, LaGuardia Airport is right there in East Elmhurst, Queens. The LaGuardia Airport is here, and then right out in the water on the island is Rikers Island. So when you're on Rikers Island, planes are lifting off and touching down all day long, all night long. Because literally, LaGuardia Airport is right there. So you exit off and you go down the street, a nice little street, and you get to the end of it, and there's like a baseball field, right? A lot of times if you're going to Rikers Island or you're coming back from court or whatever, you'll see kids out there playing in that baseball field. Then you turn a corner. Now, that's where the sign for Rikers Island is. Right there by that baseball field on the corner, right? You turn a corner and you go in, and there's a little parking lot there, and the city bus stops there to pick people up who are coming and going from Rikers. Usually visitors, but whatever, it's a city bus. Then you cross the bridge, and now you run into what they call the turnstile. If you're on the bus, you stop, and then you'll go on through it. The guard will wave the other guard on through it, right? But if you're coming to visit somebody on Rikers Island, you got to go into that turnstile building. It's a big building with turnstiles. It's like a subway, and officers are there, and you tell them who you're there to visit, and then you got to wait to get on a school bus goes up and down this main street. It's called Hazen Street, and it's several school buses, not just one. It's a very, very busy place. It's a huge county jail. I think the numbers have decreased a whole lot compared to what they used to be. It used to be like 20,000 people on Rikers Island when I was going through. I think the numbers have done dropped now to 5,000 or 6,000. In other words, only people who really need to be in jail are being locked up in New York City. A lot of crimes they used to lock you up for aren't crimes anymore, like smoking weed, This is a shout out to all the men and women who are locked down in cold, dark, lonely places. I rolled this up perfect, and I'm smoking it for you. You're down, but you're not forgotten. So anyway, the bus goes through all that process, takes us from Manhattan way out over into East Elmhurst, Queens. Take this up there. Yeah, I know. I'm going to forward through this. If I possibly can. I just can't take those lights flashing myself. Anyway, the bus takes us to C95. You get off, you go in the receiving room. There's bullpens like 12 different bullpens. You go into a bullpen, you get processed in, they give you an ID, all this other stuff they do. And then you got to go to medical. Now, medical is designed like this. I drew out a little diagram. So this is a hallway connecting the front of C95 to the back part of C95. And halfway through this hallway, you got medical. When you go in medical, there's like a big open area, and over here is a bullpen here and a bullpen there. And the bars on that bullpen, way back in the day, didn't even have no bars on it. You would just sit over there. And they'd call you into medical. Do you take methadone? You got any diseases? What's wrong with you, etc. This day, we were in medical, right? And it was packed. I mean, there was just way too many people in this side and in this side, right? And there was an older Latin gentleman in there, right? And you could tell he was in a very agitated state of mind. Who knows what was going on with him? He didn't speak English, so I didn't understand what he was saying, but he was asking the nurses over and over for whatever he was asking for. He was getting other Latin people, guys to translate for him, and the nurses wouldn't do anything for him. Whatever he was requesting, they wouldn't give it to him. And the guy grabbed the bars right here. There'd be bars here. That's a row of bars right there. So he grabbed these bars, right? And at the time, the bars, that gate had just been put in. And the bars weren't round. They were square. And they had actually sharp corners on them. He grabbed the bars and started beating his head against the bars. And he was beating his head against the bars extremely hard. So obviously the guy's suffering from some kind of mental health issue to do that. And he beat his head on the bar so hard, not only did he obviously break the skin and he was bleeding like a stuck pig, but he had beat his head on the bar so hard, he had gashes in the bone of his forehead. I mean, about that long, and I would imagine maybe not a quarter of an inch deep, but like deep enough where you could see that there were like impressions on the bone because the skin was laying wide open. Maybe 5 or 8 different, gashes in his forehead now because he had beat it on these sharp bars. He was bleeding like a stuck pig, and you could see the gashes on the bone. All right? And everybody was like, stay over there, because they didn't want to get blood all over him because he was just literally bleeding. If you shave your head, if you get a little nick, you'll bleed. Well, imagine having all those gashes in your forehead, how much you're going to bleed. The blood was everywhere, man. I mean, I've seen a lot of people get cut on Rikers Island, stabbed on Rikers Island, jumped on Rikers Island. But to see somebody else do that to themselves and do it so aggressively and so hard, it was just like, wow, man. Can't really believe it. You know what I mean? And at that point, the nurse, they called the lieutenant, cops came, they didn't want to touch him. He wasn't even resisting them. He was asking for some kind of help and nobody would do nothing for him. And I guess in a final act of desperation or whatever episode he was having, he grabbed those bars and just started beating his head, man, and just started bleeding everywhere. I mean, literally all over the place. And when they finally come in, I don't know what happened to him. Obviously, they took him to the hospital. I've never seen him again after that. But, when you're going through that process, you don't really go into medical until you've been in the system about 30 hours. So everybody who's in medical who saw the judge and got remanded or had a bail or whatever, Now they're on the island and they're going, in through the booking in process. And the medical is not in what they would call shipping and receiving or R&D. You go through that process, then they have to walk you down this long hallway to get you to medical. So I guess he was just tired, exhausted, going through whatever he was going through, and they send everybody to Rikers Island from all 5 boroughs. And I mean, I'll never forget it. I can see it in my mind, literally like I was there yesterday. It was probably one of the most brutal, and I've seen a lot of brutal things, man. I did a lot of hard time, 25 years. Approximately 14 and a half, 15 years in New York State, and all the big houses in that state, Sing Sing, Attica, Sullivan, Elmira, where else was I at? Auburn. I did 2 years there. A whole host of mediums. And then 10 years in the United States Penitentiary. So I got something to measure it by. Now, I've seen a lot of brutal acts, but I tell you what, seeing that man grab those bars and start beating his own head, and it only lasted 3 to 5 seconds. But I just happened to be looking right at him when he was doing it. I wasn't facing another way. I happened to be looking in that direction because there was a lot of commotion. So I'm looking, he just grabs the bar and literally just bang, 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 bang. And I guess that's the way he was saying, oh yeah, I'm going to get some attention now, But I can't really, I can only imagine what the man was feeling to have been pushed to that form, to that extreme regarding whatever situation he was dealing with. But it was literally, man, one of the most, probably the most gnarly thing I've ever seen in my life. And it sounds almost like a brief, and it was real brief, and but it just stands out because of like the blood and the gore. And then when I looked at him, I could literally see the gashes in his bone on his forehead. That's how hard he hit. He wasn't playing, he meant to do what he did, And I guess we could all use that as a learning experience, man. Prison is not a nice place, okay? And, it's one thing to have tattoos and love heavy metal and, be an outlaw in your heart, okay? Be a renegade in your heart. That's cool, man, because that kind of fosters creativity and, willing to take a little chance, just because you take a chance doesn't mean it has to be anything illegal. You could take a chance on opening a business or whatever, you know what I mean? So it's good to have that little, that rebel soul in you, because it makes you question things. I've never been the type of person who could just accept something somebody said on face value. I need, most of the people I won't even listen to anyway. But if I do kind of take the time to listen to what you got to say, even if you say something that makes sense to me, and I half-ass believe you from your point of view, I'm still going to go and do my own research and make sure that what you're saying is true, especially if I'm going to allow what you said to influence me, or potentially influence me, and I've just always been that kind of guy. But I highly urge, man, especially young people. If you're already older and you're involved in a life of crime, good luck. I hope it works out for you. Who am I to judge? I've made my own mistakes. But, if you're a younger person, man, and you've never been convicted of any felonies, literally, no matter what situation you may find yourself in, as long as you're alive, man, there's hope. And especially if you're free and you're alive, don't do anything out of frustration or without thinking it through clearly. End up in trouble, man, and end up, not only going to prison, but getting a felony. Because once you have a felony, man, it's going to be very, very hard for you to ever be able to integrate yourself back into society, man, because a lot of people don't want to hire you. And now with modern technology, I mean, people can do a background check on you to know if they want to, rent you an apartment or whatever, and it feels pretty good, man, to have a legitimate driver's license and be able to go and rent a car if you need to, have credit cards. And I feel blessed and I feel lucky and, to be in a position to have come out of prison and still have a relatively sound mind. And I guess, it's important that we put the word relatively sound mind in the sentence, right? But to have a relatively sound mind and be healthy, and that was a real story, man. And I don't want anyone to ever be in that little holding cell right there that I'm showing you. This is where the CEOs would hang out, and medical would be all back here. I don't want anybody to ever have to, who's free right now, who has an opportunity and can make choices, to ever find themselves in this holding cell in C95 or in this holding cell in C95 waiting to get medical. So then you could be assigned to a housing unit. And I really don't want to see anybody in that position, So I do prison-related content, man. And I try not to be some, pushy type of guy, telling people what they should or shouldn't do. I'm not qualified to tell anybody what, that's not what I do here. But I tell you what, it'd be a lot easier for you to learn from my experiences. And even though I do prison-related content, man, I don't want it to never come across like, I'm preaching or I know more than this guy or that guy, whatever, man. It's not really like that. It's easier to learn from somebody else's mistakes than it is to make those own mistakes yourself and have to suffer the consequences on a personal level. And I'm not going to tell you life is going to be easy. Life is never easy, The day that you have an easy, trouble-free day with no problems whatsoever of any kind, you might not be alive anymore. There's a good chance every day you wake up and every day you face the world, there's going to be some kind of trial and tribulation that comes along with that day, And some of them may be very small and some of them may be quite bigger or even huge. I have a rule in my life, and it's something that my wife and I live by, and I think it's probably one of the hallmarks of having a healthy relationship, a healthy marriage, and having a healthy state of mind. When I come through my door into my house, when I come into my house and I come into my living room, I check all the BS there, all right? I don't bring no BS into that door with me. My home is a place of cooperation, tranquility, mellowness, happiness, health. Because I know something. Once I walk at that front door, that ain't really my world no more. It's everybody's world that's roaming around in it. But in my house, I have a huge degree of control. And so do you, hopefully, Hopefully you're in a situation where you have that kind of control. My life has been long and sordid. I'm a country boy who lived in New York City for 30 years, been on Rikers Island, all upstate New York, in the feds. Now I live in Florida in a small little rural community, And nobody knew too much about me until I started this YouTube channel, and now I'm sure a lot of my neighbors probably, watch or whatever, and it's cool. It's all love, but if you can't come home and be peaceful and tranquil and relaxed and happy and healthy and well-fed, how can you recharge your batteries if you don't have a support system? Even if it's just one other person, even if it's just one other person that you can rely on, and that person's a good person, and and that person can rely on you, it'll go a long way, man, for you not having to make the type of mistakes that I made, Learn from my mistakes and laugh along with me, and I hope you watch the channel, and I hope you'll think about liking and subscribing. I just wanted to bring you this episode, because I know sometimes you know, and to me also, you know, I'll see a creator and I really like the creator, but he only puts a video out every, you know, week or whatever, you know, and, you know, sometimes if you have people who enjoy hanging out with you and kicking it with you, it's just cool to put a video out, you know, even if you're not talking about no, you know, super deep topic or whatever, man, you know, yeah, man, I could tell like 1,000 stories off of Rikers Island. And, you know, Rikers Island is a very, very unique place, you know. But I met some cool people on Rikers Island too. Every day, every second wasn't chaos and mayhem. There was a lot of chaos and mayhem. You know, I would say more chaos and mayhem than there was like laughing and playing cards and shooting the breeze and listening to the radio and stuff, you know. But yeah, I met some cool people on Rikers Island, played cards, did push-ups, you know. So I'll get into those stories too as the channel starts to gain momentum and get bigger and bigger, and you know, hopefully I can pick up some subscribers and, you know, and keep putting out content, you know. I'm not just into prison content. I do a prison content related show because I think, for lack of a better word, I can talk as an expert after doing 25 years in prison. You know, I call like I see it. I've met probably a handful of really decent COs. Out of the thousands of COs I've met, that I've come across, that I've dealt with on my day-to-day life in that 25-year period, I've met a handful of decent ones. A handful, literally. Then I've met a whole lot more that was just half-assed, you know. Didn't go out of their way to, you know, bust your balls, but weren't really that cool neither. I met a lot more indifferent, you know, hardened to humanity. And, you know, I hear a lot of people talking about war as if it's no big deal. But here's the thing. When you're in a position where you have to do potentially violent or dangerous things in order to survive, what it does, man, is it hardens your heart. And it took me a long time when I got out of prison to be able to get over my PTSD that I suffered big time. That's the reason why I consume marijuana. I don't consume it just for the sake of being a pothead. I consume it for the medical value that it offers me. I'm not taking no pills, not when it's not necessary. I'm going to stick to a natural, you know, a natural medication that's been around for thousands of years and been used for thousands of years, you know. That's just the way I see it. Other people may see it different, and please don't take anything I'm saying as medical advice. Consult a medical professional. But, yeah, man, and as this channel unwinds, I'll get into all kind of different stories. I really love hiking, backpacking, survivalist. You know, I spent years squatting in New York City abandoned buildings. Now, when I speak about squatting, I'm not talking about, you know, what we think of as squatting now, somebody going into a home that somebody owns and the person's on vacation and they take over the home or something. I'm not talking about that kind of squatting. I'm talking about squatting in legitimate abandoned buildings down on the Lower East Side and the South Bronx and the North Bronx, over in Brooklyn. Abandoned buildings nobody was living in, you know, nobody was paying rent for. It was abandoned. The windows was busted out, whatever, you know. And we would go in there, and, you know, I wouldn't say we'd make it into an apartment, but some people did. You had a lot of squats that ended up getting, you know, they cleaned the building up and got it back up to code, and they were able to, you know, make it into their home, you know, their building, the squatters who brung it up to code. But a lot of the squats that I stayed in, you know, we get a mattress or make a bedroll on the floor. You know, you can heat with rubbing alcohol. You put sand in a bucket with some bricks or some rocks. You can pour rubbing alcohol on there, like medical rubbing alcohol on there, and it'll burn clean. So if you seal the windows up and you put blankets over all the doorways that's leading into the room, seal it up, and you light 3 or 4 bottles of that, you know, over an hour period, you know, you put a bottle in there, light it, let it burn, it'll warm that room up pretty decent, at least where you can take your jacket off, take your boots off, clean yourself up, you know. So I'm a hardcore urban survivalist, you know, and I did that for years off and on. I didn't do 14 years straight in New York. I did like 3 or 4 years, got out, did 2 years, got out, did 4 years, got out, etc. It evened up to about 14, 15 years. And then the feds busted me in 2012, and I got 10 years for, robbing some banks, okay? Or not have did that, or not have did it, okay? And I definitely recommend anybody who's watching this video, do not do it. It cost me 10 years in hell. And I tell you what, man, I got lucky to make it through that one, okay? Anybody who goes to a United States penitentiary and walks out the other end without any stab wounds on them, man, and still have a relatively healthy mind and a healthy body. I mean, I consider myself to be extremely lucky to have been through some of the things I've been through in my life and still be able to make this video to you today. Hey, guys, you mean the world to me. I mean, to keep bringing you this content. I do it just because I like to do it. And I think I have something to say that represents just more than my point of view. I'm sure, and hit me up in the comments. And, I just enjoy bringing you guys, content, man. So, look, until next time, stay up. I won't make you wait long for another video. Hey, stay up. Peace.